Okay, this is a different problem than the problem that I usually run into. The problem that I usually run into doesn't give me all the notifications like this. I don't know what's happening. I'm not disconnecting completely, but yeah, this is actually way worse than it typically is, and I don't know what's going on with it, but it is upsetting. But we have saved. Oh god. Okay, here's the leech. And I need it to come to me, because I can't fight it with all its friends in there. We need to be killing it as fast as possible, because I do think that overall it is going to be... oh god. I say I need to kill it as fast as possible, but actually pull it out to me. Suboptimal. Okay, that's concern. That might be GG, honestly. We're hitting for 90k with Severia, which means that this thing's still very healthy. On the plus side, Severia is not going to go down to this thing. And it's possible the Commoditum won't either, honestly. Okay, that's concerning, but we got someone back up. That was probably a mistake, honestly. There wasn't really much reason to bring her up, because she's just going to go back down again. So I basically just sacrificed a bunch of HP that potentially could be a problem for me. Commoditum's going to take a long time to get that HP back. And... that thing just pegged Aura? I think it just pegged Aura. That's very funny. It pegged the person who was already basically dead on its one leg. That's some plate armor. Okay, we got the leech. That was the only thing in this room. This room has more than just one. So one per, like, 15 enemies or something crazy like that is going to be a boss, right? Oh, I should... Okay. But yeah, by the way, Metaphor is the game that just came out that's, like, not a Persona game, but is made by, like, the same company, and is using the Persona 5 like engine as far as I can tell, certainly for combat, and I've been enjoying it so far, and I'm very curious to see where they go with it. It's interesting to see a game made by Atlas that isn't taking place in, like, just like a high school in Tokyo. The one thing that I will say about the plot is that it is not... the protagonist is not a high school student in Tokyo. Now, okay, they're not always in Tokyo. Sometimes they're in other parts of Japan, but it's not a high school student in Japan. That's not who the protagonist is. So... pretty wild, shocking, Like, truly shocking. And I'm looking forward to seeing more of it. I've been playing it. I was playing it with my wife over the weekend. We managed to get a pretty decent bit into the game. It's not quite as hard as I usually associate the Persona games. Some of the mechanics are a little different, which means that it's I don't know. I don't know how much detail I even want to go into, like, how the mechanics work. I'm fairly confident to say that for the way that the early dungeons work in Persona, there's a couple of things that, like, you run into as a problem, which is, like, if you don't know what the boss is going to be, you might not have what you need to fight the boss when you get to the boss, because, like, you didn't build your characters that way. So, like, you just don't, like, you just don't have access to the thing that you need, the answer to the boss. This is less true for, like, actual, like, main story bosses, and more true for the, like, sub-bosses and things like that, which tend to be just, like, normal enemies, but stronger. And normal enemies, but stronger, tend to be, like, okay, this has a weakness, and if you don't exploit the weakness that it has, you could be in very deep shit. So you end up with that problem in Persona, and I was kind of delighted to find that in this one, when I came across a boss that I was struggling with, whenever I came up against a problem, I was like, oh, I know how to solve this problem, and I just swapped my party's stuff around a bit and was able to actually just immediately have an answer to the problem. That's probably going to be less true as I go further, because, like, the way that I've built the party is going to have more and more of an effect over time. But it's more of a problem in the early game, in these games, because in the early game, it's a lot harder to... Basically, in the early game, I feel like your weakest point in an RPG relative to the enemies, where it's like, okay, I can do this thing, but it's going to take resources that I don't have an infinite amount of to be able to do basically anything. And so every time you do something, you're, like, reducing a limited resource. And this is something that makes it so that it's very difficult in Persona 4. I mean, in all of the Persona games, but in Persona 3, the fatigue mechanic is really what gets you. Is that if you're in a dungeon for too long, your characters just get tired, and then you can't really progress. Like, you can't keep progressing past the point that your characters get tired, because it gives you huge amounts of negative modifiers that really just completely make it impossible to do hard shit. But in the later games, in Persona 4 and Persona 5, you don't get fatigued in the dungeons. It's just that you just run out of SP, and once you've run out of SP, it's like, okay, well, I don't have anything I can do because I'm out of mana, and I would need mana to heal, and I would need mana to exploit weaknesses, and I would need mana to do this and to do that. So there's, like, a limited amount of farming you can do with the mana pool that you're given, and so clearing the dungeon in one day requires being very, very careful with your resource management and engaging in shenanigans. And then later on, you get access to abilities that will give you SP regen. And once you have SP regen, you're just like, okay, well, I just need to do any activity that costs me less SP, then I'm going to regenerate from doing that activity, right? So then you're fine. But that takes a long time before you start getting access to that. It usually takes a couple of dungeons, I think. And in this one, it was interesting because I cleared the first, like, major dungeon really quick. And it was very nice. Oh, so anyway, so you've got all this. So basically, if you don't have the right stuff, a lot of the times, that's what ends up causing a problem for you. Is that you, in order to be able to beat this boss, you need to have someone that can either exploit its weaknesses or do some other similar thing, right? You need to be able to do something to be able to beat this boss. And in this one, I was able to just use the stuff that I had available to me to be able to take out the first boss, which was good. Anyway, really enjoying it. I don't know whether I would recommend it yet, because a lot of it depends on the answers to the questions that they're posing. They've got a bunch of questions that they're posing, and it's very, very funny, because I think this is probably the game that is the most, like, explicitly political that they've made. And it's going to be interesting to see. They're posing a bunch of philosophical questions about power, but they're also, like, we haven't seen any characters who are engaging with those questions in a way that I think is terribly deep or insightful. So that's like the questions at hand are really deep and interesting questions, and then the characters are dopey anime characters who are fully incapable of meaningfully interacting with the questions that are being asked. And I'm curious to see if the disconnect there is one that is basically a deliberate disconnect, and that over time the sort of like naivety of the party is going to be called into question by the writing, or if it's going to be left to stand as it is. So it's going to be like, so you can have a character, and you can have the protagonist and this, that, the other thing. You can have them be very naive about the nature of the world, but not be naive about the nature of the world yourself as the author, right? The author and the characters are not the same worlds, right? They are working from a different set of parameters. And I'm curious to see if, regardless of whether the characters ever figure out that the way that they're looking at the world is fundamentally flawed, or if they won't, or if it's like, or if it's tied into like the kinds of like Japanese art in particular tends to be very pro-feudal. This is true for fantasy in general. Fantasy in general is pretty, like, pro-monarchy in a very strange way for modern society, right? Like, it's unusual to have a pro-monarchist take for like a liberal democracy, right? Like, that's an unusual thing to have. Is like, oh yes, you know, I come from a liberal democracy and I'm making pro-monarchy art. That's unusual. And I'm curious to see. It's unusual, but it's very common in fantasy in particular, right? Particularly in Japanese fantasy. Japanese fantasy is very, very, like, you know, loyalty to the crown, very commonly. More so than most art, I think. And so what I'm curious about is that I'm curious to see what the authorial position is here. And I suspect that the authorial position is going to be more interesting and nuanced than what it seems like it is in the beginning, based off of the characters that we've had introduced to us and their particular point of view about things.
Never seen one before.
We'll just have to see. I feel like, if I'm being honest with myself, most likely, it's my assumption that we're gonna have, like, the, like, Ruby or Legend of Korra or whatever angle, where it's like, okay, well, we have villains who, you know, say things that are good, but do bad things. And then the answer to the question of, you know, should we do good things instead of bad things is, well, this person who said that they wanted to do good things was actually a puppy-killing monster, so we don't have to deal with that, with answering those questions about the fundamental nature of our society. Right? Like, that's kind of the way that, like, that's the most common way that media handles that.
Have no fear.
Oh, we might die. I fucked up. Oh, we're probably gonna die. I think we die here. We might not die, but we are probably gonna die.
Have no fear. Ow.
Fuck. Do I have any?
Have help.
Oh! Okay. So we have to reload back to here. This is before we even killed the leech. Which is pretty rough. But... do we have an angle here? We don't have an angle. I don't think. Might be okay. I think this can hit us. I think it's just missing. Yeah. Let's see here. But anyway, that's my assumption of where it's going to go. Is it's going to just not deeply investigate the questions that they have posed, because that's the default expectation that I have from most media, is that it's going to pose interesting questions and then not meaningfully engage with the question, and instead just kind of like dodge the question. I will say that some of the aesthetics of the game make me feel like I should have a little bit of hope. I feel like it makes sense to have a little bit of hope in this particular context, so I'm hopeful that they will meaningfully engage with the questions that they've asked. But I'm not. I'm honestly not really expecting to. I'm not expecting them to. Alright, what we're going to try to do here is we're going to try to clear this room out. I unfortunately was trying to do a thing that's a little bit more dangerous just now. Yeah, one of the things that's interesting about the Persona series is that they engage with this. They engage with a lot of interesting topics and do a lot of social commentary And I think that a lot of the social commentary that they do is actually really good. I think they do some really good and interesting social commentary. They tackle some difficult issues. Like, Persona 5 legitimately talks about some very difficult to talk about topics. And sometimes they do a great job of it, and sometimes they go back to, like, they, like, fall back on these weird anime tropes that, like, are, like, that kind of like go contrary to the message of the actual story. It's like this weird thing where it's like it's almost like a tick, right? Where it's like you have like all this thoughtful and engaging interaction with themes that are, interesting. And then the anime trope engine, just grabs control of the wheel and just starts doing crazy shit. And it's like, no, what are you? No, you're driving all over the daisies that I just did. Not because it's like, oh, silliness doesn't belong in this, but because the things that they're doing in the context of the more serious narrative that they're going for actively work against the narrative, right? Like, the way that one of the characters is handled by the narrative is really interesting and involves a lot of, like, stuff that ties into a bunch of different interesting things, and then they undermine a lot of that stuff pretty directly, like in the next scene. Like, they'll touch on really important and interesting societal issues, and then they'll do an anime trope that, like, kind of leans directly into the thing that they're talking about, but they'll, like, with, like, no awareness of it, right? Like, it's like, oh, there's no apparent awareness that you're doing the thing that you were just complaining about a second ago. So there's an interesting element there where, like, there's a... It feels like you have multiple authors at the helm who are not working in concert with each other, but are working at odds with each other, right? Like, that's the way that I would describe some of the writing in Persona 5. A lot of the writing is very good. Don't get me wrong, like, a lot of the writing is very good, but there's also a bunch of stuff that's just kind of weird. And it's actually magnified a lot in Persona 5 Royal. Weirdly. Persona 5 Royal does a lot of weird stuff with the additional content that is just weird and bizarre to do. And in a lot of ways undermines the original text. And I'm not talking about the actual plot of it. I'm talking about, like, incidental stuff that they added, where it's like, this is a weird thing to add, and I don't know why you added this to this, like, not important thing, right? There's this it's not like, oh, this is the greater plot undermines the, like, the plot elements added in this undermine the other game. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, like, minor weird shit that they added that then undermines themes of the main plot. It's weird stuff. So there's an interesting relationship there with the Persona series, where it's like, it's held back by how, like, directly tied into the, like, high school anime tropes it is, when it's trying to talk about serious issues that are serious high school issues. It's not like there's serious issues about something else. It's like these are serious issues about high school, and you know the like stuff that goes on there that get kind of undermined by the animeification of the subplots, I guess. Like when you're not on the main plot, you just have a completely different tone to the game. I don't entirely know how to describe it. It's just that there's a lot of game there, and they're fitting in a lot of tropes. But anyway, I'm curious to see what they do with the game that I started over the weekend, because I think it'll just be interesting. It'll also be interesting to see if anybody that I know actually plays it other than me, so that I can talk about it with anybody. It was very funny though, because like I wanted to play the game, and I was like, I started it up, and I'm like, okay, well, you know, I'll probably play on, you know, some random difficulty, and then I see the highest difficulty, and I'm like, excuse me, you're calling? I have to play on that difficulty just based off of the name alone, right? Then like I have to play this on the highest difficulty, and then it turns out I can't play it. I can't play it on the highest difficulty. It will not allow me to play it on the highest difficulty. I think you have to beat the game before it'll let you play it on the highest difficulty or something. It does specifically say that it, like in the difficulty thing, oh, you should only do this if you're a veteran. And I'm like, oh, okay, I think I know what this mode is, because they have this difficulty setting in Persona 5, and it's probably the same thing. I haven't played that difficulty setting on Persona 5. It wasn't in the game when I first played. But I was like, oh, okay, so I can try that difficulty. I'm not usually interested in it. But I could try it. And then I tried it out, and I was like, oh, you can't select this difficulty. You're too much of a noob. I'm like, oh, okay. Fine then. I cannot get in the green here. Can we get in the green on the other side? Wait, did I just get in the green? No. They're very long. They take a long time to get through. They're very long. And they're really only interesting if you are into like a very long, protracted, like management, like time management simulator. I shouldn't say they're only interesting if you're into that, but like they're probably only worth it if you're interested in that, right? Like, the gameplay is so huge, and I think that the animes do a pretty good job of giving you the gist of what happens. And I think that some of the scenes in the anime are better because of the fact that the protagonists are these kind of like voiceless voids. They've got the silent protagonist thing going on, so you never see them talking in cutscenes and stuff like that. And so having them have a personality in the anime, which exists in the games, which is the thing that's kind of weird, is that all the protagonists, I feel, have a pretty distinct personality to them, which is unusual for a character that's like a silent protagonist. So they have these kind of fairly distinct personalities. It's just that you don't. Sorry, I'm looking for the switch to open that. Wait, I'm in the green now. Let's go. Okay, we are actually going to save this because we're struggling in here. This is a level 200 dungeon, and we have a lot of widow waves. Can I use these? Yes. We're making a save, saving under danger. And do we want to loot the chests? We'll loot the chests when we finish. We'll loot all of the chests when we finish up the dungeon. Right, I was looking for a switch. I don't remember where the switch is for this secret door here, which apparently it should have a switch, because I don't seem to be able to just click on it. So I was thinking maybe one of these beds had a switch for it. I don't feel like it would be inside the tunnel. Oh, you know where it probably is? It's probably in the chapel on the back side of the podium. That's probably where it is. Is there even a podium? I don't know, but we'll find out. We have cleared these rooms before.
Have no fear.
Oh, shit. I think we can only get hit by that animist right now, so I'd like to try to just burn through it rather than... How low is everybody? Negative 21,000. Okay, we're not going to be able to do much with them. So we're going to try to just burn through this animist. If we can take out this animist, we should be able to just regen back up.
Have no fear.
But that is a big if. We just saved, so I'm not going to do anything too crazy. We're just going to stand here poking this animist. Cortal's hitting for a pretty decent amount of damage. And it's the lowest tier.
Have no fear.
So... yeah, the Persona series is interesting because it's good enough that despite the fact that it's a genre that I'm really just not interested in. I generally don't like games that are set in like a modern setting that much, just kind of in general. And I'm like 40. I don't really have any interest in watching a thing about teenagers. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't care. I don't care about teenagers. I mean, I do. Like, they are morally relevant, right? I don't want to watch media about teenagers, really. I'm just not that interested. So, like, I'm happy to watch media about people who are, like, between 18 and 20 and, like, coming into the like, actual world. But the whole, like, coming-of-age thing is just not that interesting to me as a genre. Because, like, all media is written from that perspective, basically. And it wasn't that interesting a portion of my life. And I don't think it's that interesting to engage with. Whereas I think that media that's about, like, oh, you know, here's like a cute romance story about two office workers who are just kind of like, you know, getting to know each other and getting to like each other. I think that's way more interesting. Not because it's intrinsically more interesting, but because it's so rare and it's also such a common thing. Like, so many people, you know, meet their people at work. And not everybody, by any stretch of the imagination. And the workplace is not a great place to meet people, right? It's not an optimal place to try to find your people. But it happens, right? People, you know, meet a person and they're like, oh yeah, this is very cool. And so anyway, so I enjoy that kind of stuff. But if you're putting a thing in a high school, it's like, man, you know, okay, you know, teenagers being teenagers. Yeah, I think that fantasy stuff is intrinsically, you know, more interesting to me than stuff that's in a modern setting, unless the thing in the modern setting is talking about something that I don't see talked about in media very much, and which is kind of, like, unique to the real world, right? Like, I think that it's very hard to create, like, a satisfying, like, office story that takes place in a fantasy environment, because like what's the point of the fantasy environment if everyone's just going to sit at a cubicle all day? And I guess you could do fun things with that, right? But like I don't see, you might as well just use a real setting for that, right? But I definitely am much more drawn to fantasy environments, so it's fun to have something that's made by, you know, a team that I'm really impressed with, that I really enjoy the stuff that they make, and have it not just be like, okay, well, you know, you're a teenager, you know, hanging out with other teenagers and or adults in sometimes really weird and concerning ways, where it's like, you know, I think that some of these social links should actually be in jail, actually. I think maybe some of these people should be in jail. This is some weird shit. Isn't the protagonist like 16? This person should be in jail. And to have it be like, okay, well, the protagonist is 18 and we're in a fantasy setting. And they're not, you know, a student. They're actually like a person who's doing who's got like a specific thing. And they're a young person, but they're doing like a thing. They're not like just hanging out at school all day or whatever. And I don't have to feel like, oh yeah, the people that I talk to, some of these people need to be put on a watch list just because of the way that they're interacting with my character. Weirdly, I haven't seen anything like super shady in this whole game so far. It's wild. Imagine playing like a JRPG and not feeling like, why is this child naked? Why is the character design of this child like this? And I haven't seen anything like that in the game that I've been playing. It's wild. It's wild. Look, I'm betting that it will. I'm just surprised it hasn't happened already. I'm not at the beginning. Like, I have gotten quite a bit done.
I'm badly hurt.
So, I don't know. It's possible. It's possible that they won't do it at all. It's also possible that the fairy is supposed to look like a kid, but the fairy doesn't look like a kid to me. They don't have like the like, I don't think they have like the childlike proportions that you typically expect to see from like the characters who are like, oh, I'm 1,000 years old. Let's not think about the fact that I look like I'm 10. Kind of characters, right? Like, which I don't actually have any idea how old the fairy is, but point being, like, I don't think that they are... Their design doesn't seem particularly sus to me. So... Imagine the world we could live in if anime wasn't the most sus media in existence. Imagine the utopia if anime wasn't full of all this, like, creepy, you know, imagery involving children. It would just be a utopia. The whole world would just be beautiful all the time. Where is the switch for this? Is it just sitting right here? It's not just sitting right here. I think I ran into this problem last time, except the last time I didn't even notice that there was this thing here. It's not the water. Unless it is the water and I just failed to click on it, which is also possible. We're going to open this. We're going to try to just clear through these. that's not it's not a cultural thing. Like it's explicitly not. I mean, except in the context of like, you know, if you treat like the if you think that pedo culture is like unique and viable, it's kind of like how like you run into the same problem in Hollywood, right? It's not like it doesn't exist in Hollywood, where like there's a lot of really creepy stuff that directors do with kids, right? Like they do a bunch of weird shit. So it's not a unique issue to Japan by any stretch of the imagination. Like, Western culture is also extremely obsessed with teenage girls. And I'm pretty sure that the laws are pretty similar as well. Where it's like... I don't think like things like age of consent and stuff like that laws are actually meaningfully different between places like the United States and places like Japan. They're handled on a local level in both cases. And they're fairly similar. Realistically, it's just like this one particular media is a mixed space where you're making stuff that's kind of for kids and kind of not. And because of the fact that the actors are all adults in a voice booth, and it's just drawings, you don't run into things where, like, if you were to pull a lot of the stuff with a non-animated medium, like a non-drawn medium, if you were to try to pull that stuff, you'd immediately get arrested. Like half of the stuff that happens, if you try to do that with a child actor in any country, including Japan, you just get arrested. So, like, there's a lot of stuff where it's like, I think it's just a matter of the medium allowing people to make stuff that they otherwise would not have been able to make. And then that kind of creates, like, people who want to make that kind of sussy stuff end up making stuff in that genre because it's, like, the only place they can. Right? So... let's see. Well, I mean, the issue is that a lot of these people are not, like... are not limiting their behavior to, you know, drawn characters. It's an issue. Like, the issue with this kind of stuff ties into, like, larger scale issues culturally that we have, where we do have this obsession with, like, the sexuality of children. And it has all sorts of massive effects on the way that society treats children, especially, like, young girls. Like, young girls are treated very badly by society. And some of those issues are unrelated to the massive degree of sexualization of them that we have in society. But a lot of those reasons are because of the way that society specifically sexualizes them and obsesses over their coming of age and stuff like that. There's definitely issues there that are not remotely limited to like fictional spaces. Yeah, generally speaking, I agree that if people are making a thing, I'm not that miffed about like the morality of the piece of media existing, except in the case where it's like, I think it's weird for things that are like, I think inserting your weird fetishes into non-fetish media is something that, because it depends on the weird fetish that you're talking about. If you're talking about something that's like socially destructive, like as an example, the sexualization of children, like I think that stuff like that is stuff that's like, and when I say that, I do mean sexualization in the sense of like talking about like having sex with children. I'm not talking about like the weird like trans panic bullshit that we've got going on. I'm talking about like actually like, you know, child predation kind of stuff. And having that kind of stuff be in like your weird fetish media, I could see being like, I have way more tolerance for that than I do if you just put it in like your Saturday morning cartoons. You know what I mean? Like, people shouldn't be making the Saturday morning cartoons be like like that. And that's kind of what happens with anime, right? Where it's like you have this weird stuff that is like, you know, if you want to make this weird stuff where, you know, you have this like ancient, you know, 1,000-year-old, like, I don't know what my stance is on that morally. It's complicated, right? But at the same time, like, I do know that I don't think that it should be in this stuff that is just like that everybody's watching. You know what I mean? It's just, it's different.
Ow!
I don't know. So the other thing that I think that is one of the things that I think is most like troublesome about that kind of stuff, more than anything else, actually, maybe not more than anything else, but like one of the things that I think is damaging to society about the like absolute over-sexualization of like teenage girls in particular is I think it's bad for society to assign, like, the things that are associated with children are naivety and the inability to meaningfully consent because they're literally children. Like, that's what children are. And I think that the assignment of beauty standards that are based off of teenage girls is weird and creepy, and I think that that's I find that to be probably more of a problem in some cases than the like the I don't even know if that's true though. I don't know that I agree with that. It's just, it's the thing is that it's just so common. Like child abuse is so common that I just it's such a common thing that to have it represented in media uncritically so commonly, to me, is just something where I'm just like, man, like, this is not a thing that you can approach uncritically if it's such a huge societal problem, right? Like, it's such a huge problem. Let's see. I when it comes to like people's weird fetishes, I generally agree, and I wish that I could put like this kind of stuff in the same category as the like weird like vor, right? Like vor is like kind of a weird fetish. If you don't know what vor is, you don't need to Google it. But like I wish that I could put it in the same category as stuff like that. The issue is that because it's such a major problem in the real world, I don't think it's realistic to put it in the same category as stuff that's like, okay, well, this is kind of weird and like
Never seen one before.
vaguely disturbing. And I'm sure that you could find some like,
Help me.
I'm sure you could find some sort of cultural problem with it that you could vaguely associate with it. But it's not like a one-to-one, right? It's not this one-to-one relationship to like so many different like social problems in the real world that hurt so many people, in particular children, but also adults as well, because again, when you like the way that we handle this kind of stuff is just fucked. So, oh god.
Ow.
Let's see. That's sad. But yeah, you know, we'd live in a much better world if we could go, oh, well, this is just a thing that people look at drawings of, and that's where it begins and ends, because it's not a real thing, and it's like, well, this is a real thing, and it's remarkably common. Okay. I think we might want to get the fuck out of Dodge. The issue is that, like, again, in theory, I agree that it's like when you're just making art that doesn't involve any other people, you know, do what you want. The issue just becomes like, I don't know. I don't think that. There's a degree of normalization of certain types of behavior that I think are just like creepy, where it's like, it's very sus. It's just very sus. It's very sus on so many different levels. So many different levels. So many different levels. You know, it would be so nice if we lived in a world where people just were chill. It would be so nice if people were just chill. Anyway, I'm very happy that I haven't run into any, like, really shady shit in this game yet. Though, also to be fair, I'm not, like, intimately familiar with all of the weird, like,
I don't know.
tropes and things like that. So, like, but yeah, I don't think that they've done anything super shady yet. Which is nice, because it's just like, I could do without. I like when we have a cast of characters that are all, like, adults. It just makes life so much easier when you're cast as adults. Because you just don't have to worry about this kind of shit. Wait, are we done? When did that happen? What? That timing. That timing. So we got the weakness proc. Let's see. But we didn't open this door. We don't open this door. That's upstairs. That's just upstairs. That's not a door. That's the upstairs. Okay. We got the cheese. This is what happened last time. Now I'm remembering. Oh shit! Each attack reduces monster resistances by 1, huh? We got some boots with that as well. Okay. So we're now going to have multiple characters. I mean, not now, but in a billion years. We will have multiple characters who can do stuff like that. And we can go over here. Let's see.
This is nice. We don't need this.
This is pretty. It won't fit. Now here's something. You could sell it.
Ooh. Ooh. Let's leave it behind. Let's leave it behind. We don't need this. This is nice. Let's leave it behind.
Let's see. So we already opened that. Got this. And we can go over here. Go over here.
This is nice. We don't need this.
Now this will do. Now here's some. Now this will do. It's worthless. It's worthless. It's worthless.
We don't need this.
Well, the thing about that is that, again, it comes down to...
Let's leave it behind. I wish I could learn that.
A lot of it comes down to...
We don't need this. This is nice.
It won't fit. We could sell it.
The...
Sorry.
I mean, first of all, there's the obvious issues of, like... of consent, but, like, fetishes don't exist in a vacuum.
I can't carry anymore.
Right? Like, fetishes represent things. And the things that fetishes represent are, you know, complex and, like, you know, different people are into different things for all number of different reasons, right? But, like, there's a big difference between, like, someone making fetish content for some, like, particular, like, weird thing, and someone making, like, fetish content that's, like, the most common thing in existence and is also tied to such damaging behavior in the real world. Like, there's really just no comparison to anything else, right? There's no other weird fetish shit that is not simultaneously reinforced by hegemonic norms of society, as well as being, like, pretty much just explicitly, like, the only actionable way that this could be done in the real world would be, like, very damaging, and it's very easy to do. Right? Like, it's extremely antisocial behavior, it's extremely easy to do behavior, and it's extremely, like, it's extremely common, right? And those three factors together, to me, are a problem, right? Like, it's not, I don't think it's equivalent to even, like, the weird, like, more dark shit. Like, if you were to talk about, like, you know, like, if you're talking about, like, weird stuff like snuff content and stuff like that, I find snuff content to be less problematic because, generally speaking, murder is considered bad in society and that you shouldn't do it. But sexualizing teenagers is reinforced all throughout modern society. Society welcomes that as long as you don't take that one extra step, and oftentimes even if you do, society is still behind you, right? And so I think that there's a pretty major difference. And
This is nice.
it's just, if we lived in a better world, you know, people could make weird types of art without it being intrinsically as concerning. But we don't live in a better world. We live in this one.
Needs it.
We live in this one.
This is perfect.
Like, we live in a world where people will accuse women of hitting the
It's
wall
worthless.
at 22. And they're not kidding. Right? Like, they're not kidding. And a lot of the reason that people find young women attractive is because young women are naive and easier to control. Right? And that, at its core, that's what I think most of the people who are into that as a fetish are into. Which I think is kind of a weird thing to fetishize.
Very good. Very good. Very good.
But
Very good. Very good.
But again, I wouldn't even have that much of a problem with it, because I don't have problems with similar types of stuff nearly to the same degree, if not for the fact that, again, like, society just does not care. You know? Like, if you look at, like, if you look at the people who are talking about protecting children, generally, the people who are obsessed with that are people who want to protect children from other people being able to do what they want to do to them. Like, the number of these, like, people who are like, you know, ooh, you know, drag queens are coming for your kids. Most of those people are,
It's worthless.
like, actually pedos. Like, they, like, literally, they often get convicted, and then they'll hang out with a bunch of other people who have been convicted, even if they themselves haven't been convicted. Like, all these fucking anti-LGBT activists who are constantly talking about, like, grooming children. Like, those people are not... They're not trying to protect children at all. And it ends up causing problems. Like, we have a world where most of the people who talk about protecting children want children to be protected from the information that would stop them from preying upon them.
Do come in.
Like, unironically, like, the people who talk about that kind of shit are people who want there to be no sex education in schools, which is directly tied to increased vulnerability and stuff like that. It's so fucked. It's so completely fucked. Anyway, anime is very sussy. that's the thing to take away from this is anime is pretty sussy, and but the other thing that I do think is important to note about that is it's not uniquely so.
We don't need this.
It is more mainstream in anime these days than it is in Hollywood these days. However, if you look back at what Hollywood was producing when I was a kid, Hollywood was producing stuff that was like Lolita, but if you think the protagonist of Lolita was good and telling the truth and correct, instead of like, oh, this is a groomer who's doing terrible things and thinks he's in the right. Which is not... That's not... Apparently, I haven't read Lolita, but my understanding of Lolita as a book is that the whole point of the book is that the protagonist of our book is a bad person who is doing horrible things to a child and who has convinced themselves that they are in the right. That's my understanding. And that's not the framing on stuff like God. How many movies have been made where the fundamental premise of the movie is, and these are like mainstream movies, where the fundamental premise of the movie is this 15-year-old is seducing a 40-year-old married man. How many movies is that the premise, right? The answer should be 0. Because that's a crazy premise for a movie that should not exist outside of, again, weird fetish stuff, right? But it doesn't exist in weird fetish stuff. It exists in mainstream movies. And it's crazy. And it's crazy. That shouldn't be a mainstream plot that they keep going back to, but they keep trying to find ways to, find increasingly young people to do this to. And then eventually they got some pushback and they stopped making quite so many of those movies. But the 80s and the 90s are just full of movies where that's the basic premise. It's messed up. It's pretty messed up. Ooh, I like that. And yeah, that's exactly it, right? Like, it is about projection and anti-competition. Like, there is an element that's, when it comes to conservatives generally, like, every accusation really is a confession. Because, like, it's very hard to find a subject where, like, that isn't the case. Where, like, they'll come out publicly against a thing, and it isn't the thing that they're doing. The projection is so wild. Let's see. Well, that's the thing, right? Like, again, I don't have a problem with people, having weird fetish stuff in weird fetish communities. I just don't think that, like, the stuff that's, like, explicitly antisocial, right? Like, there's a big difference, right? Because, like, there's a bunch of stuff where it's like, okay, this person's got a foot fetish, right? A foot fetish isn't antisocial. There's nothing wrong with a foot fetish in reality. In the sense of, like, if you take a foot fetish into the real world, there's no problem with that. As a fantasy, it's fine. As a real thing, it's fine. And even if you take the hardline stance of, fantasy stuff, like, is fine as long as it remains fantasy, which I'm fairly in favor of as a stance. Like, people are into weird shit, and that's fine. I just don't think that it belongs in... I don't think the stuff that's actually antisocial, I don't think that should be in mainstream stuff. And I honestly I'm not really super sure how I feel about the stuff that isn't antisocial being in mainstream stuff. there's no real way to control for that. But I do think that, like, when a director has a foot fetish and they start, like, basically making something that to them is porn, that to me is weird to have that in, like, you know, to make that piece of art. I think that that's bizarre behavior. Like, you're involving people in this in a way that you should not be. Doesn't mean that I think that that there should be anything illegal about it. It's just that, like, if you've got a foot fetish, you should not be, like, you shouldn't be doing the weird foot shit in your mainstream movies, I don't think. I just don't think you should be, because I don't think that the actors are really meaningfully consenting to that. But I mean, these days they probably would be, right? These days they probably would be, because these days they would know about it in advance. But, like, obviously, like, if you're in the 80s and you're making your weird stuff, Quentin, like, I think that a lot of the people that you're making that with don't realize what they're making. At any rate, we have cleared out yet another one of these dungeons. These are the ones that we already had, right?
This is nice.
This is pretty high stats. Interestingly, this is actually so good. This is such high stats that it's actually just a straight-up improvement, even though it has intellect on it. So let's just slap that on you. We can just slap this on you. And... yeah, sorry, this derailment is entirely my fault. I'm going to try to bring us back to less bizarre topics. Let's see. This is not the optimal environment to try to come up with nuanced takes on very difficult topics. Like, it's really easy to come up with, like, a reactionary take to stuff like this. It's very easy to make a reactionary take to things. It's much less easy to enunciate a more complex opinion. So that's Tunnels to Eofall. So we have Tunnels to Eofall, we have the Dark Dwarf Compound. The Dark Dwarf Compound we could do... oh shit, it's 107 already? Oh god. We've been time traveling. Oh god, we spent half of this episode talking about it. It's fine. It's fine. That's fine. Well, the one thing that's nice, one thing that's very nice, is that I do know that the people who watch my videos skew to be a much older audience, and I don't have to worry quite as much about, like, people who don't know about these problems being suddenly subjected to them, you know? So, let's see here. We've got Eclipse. Let's take a look at what we've gotten. We are going to be ending, but I don't want to end very abruptly after such a weird segue. So we've finished up quite a bit of leveling here. We've gained, what, like 6 or 7 levels so far? Like, we got quite a lot of levels off of these maps. And we got some pretty decent gear, I believe. We found 2 copies of this. I don't think this is implemented, but I haven't actually checked. So let's go over to here, and let's see if this legendary works. Where do we want to go to? What day is it? Is it Sunday? It's not Sunday. I'm just going to go into a random map, and we're going to just check on a random map. So let's go into the Tunnels of Eofall. And
This one's all right.
This should be a
yeah, we talk about all sorts of random stuff. So one thing that I want to check here, there's 2 things that I want to check, basically. The first thing that I want to check is, does it work at all?
I can't identify that.
The answer is yes, it does work, and I think it's multiplied by weapon speed. Maybe not fully, but I think that there's some multiplier on weapon speed. Are you paralyzed or something? What is happening? Alright. If I hit you... Okay, what is the dark resistance on this thing? Wait, are there different values? Okay, so you have 90 dark. So, interestingly enough, we didn't reduce dark resist.
We've seen one before.
And we also didn't reduce physical resist. Is the physical resist reduction... Oh, there is a spirit resist. Interesting. Does the physical resist reduction...
This shouldn't be a problem.
I'm going to check a couple things. Because it's possible that the physical resist reduction is handled differently. So we're going to... Do I have anybody else who has the chain skill? I don't think I gave anybody else the chain skill. So we're going to do some testing with this. Before we end, because of the fact that that gave me different results than I expected, we're going to do a little bit of testing. So we just need to get someone else to have the chain skill. Why? I don't need someone else. I just need to give you an axe.
You brute.
It's not... It's fine. We don't need to worry about it. Let's see.
Sorry.
Alright, so we're going to try this without a spear. We're going to see if that changes things.